Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's virtual conference. My name is Fraser Martins, and I'm your host for today. Dun & Bradstreet India, in association with Nihilent, is glad to present this virtual conference on the pertinent topic, leveraging cloud analytics for rapid business insights. Before we begin, I request everyone to please take a moment and go through the guidelines that have been displayed on your screens. We encourage you to ask more questions in the session, and we request you to please type your queries in the Q&A session. These will be taken up in the Q&A session after the panel discussion. You can also use the chat section for sharing your views. A couple of tips. We want to know you, so please mention your name and company name when you post your question. You may also mention the person whom you are directing the question to. As you can see on your screens, there is a Q&A box and a chat box that will help you converse better with the speakers and moderator. We request you to use this to the fullest. Now let's take a quick look at the flow of today's session, and for that you may refer to the agenda displayed on your screens right now. Clearly a promising agenda with an eminent lineup of speakers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome and thank everyone for being part of this virtual session today. Let's welcome our speakers for the session. Setting the context for today's fireside chat is Mr. Yogesh Singh, Head Partners and Alliances and India Sales, Nihilent. Thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us on the panel.
Thank you.
Joining him is Mr. Harshal Chaudhary, Technology Head Data, Tata Capital. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Chaudhary. We have with us also Ms. Ipshita Chakraborty, Principal Consultant Nihilent, as part of the session. Thank you, Ms. Chakraborty, for joining us on the panel. And following her is Mr. Nikhil Mehta, Architect Data and Cloud, COE, Nihilent. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Good to have you with us today. I'm now going to hand it over to Mr. Yogesh Singh to start today's session. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thanks a lot, Fraser. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and for your valuable time. These are unprecedented times, and I wish that all of you and families are keeping safe and healthy. Now, coming back to the context of the entire webinar that we're presenting today, massive digitization and the use of digital technologies to transform the way the business operates and the possibilities that comes with it has caused a disruption across industries. Having a profound data strategy and associated analytics roadmap has been both necessity and a mode of competitive advantage for everyone involved. As we all know, the data has become one of the most valuable business assets. If you take some examples, whether it is to do with predicting loan defaulters, to predict credit risk in the finance domain, or to look at inventory stockouts in retail, or maintenance or warranty claims in manufacturing, or even human resource trends in HR, it becomes very, very important. That means the organization needs a way to break the data silos, collect and synthesize the massive amount of data from these disparate sources, and then put it all together to the right use. Nihilent, in partnership with Microsoft, is very proud to be associated with many of these transformations and innovations that we have done in past 6 to 7 years. And my colleagues with us are going to share some of those things with you. These are the guys who are really hands-on implementing the projects on the ground. So it would be great to really hear it out from you. And we do have our esteemed guest, Mr. Harshal from Tata Capital, one of the great journeys that we have had together with him. Before I hand it over to Ipshita, I'll take not more than 3 or 4 minutes to introduce Nihilent to yourself. That will give you a better view of us, who we are. I'll just quickly share my screen for that. I trust it is all visible. So in introducing Nihilent, at Nihilent, we believe that the purpose of the technology is to serve human aspirations and ambitions. Hence, our core purpose is to bring human experience to the heart of every technology transformation, be it our interactions in the physical world or even our dynamic relationship in the digital one. We all are going through the same. We are ensuring that the technology plays to the tune of human emotions, which is very, very important. And this is all enabled by various frameworks, patents, platforms, and tools that we bring to table. Some of them, as you could see there, is MCQ, a patented tool that helps us provide our change management solutions. Managing change during any such transformations that we are talking about, which are causing those disruptions, are one of the major challenges, and I'm sure our guest speaker would be talking about some of them in terms of managing those change within an organization. MCQ really comes into picture out there. Then there is a 14 signal, which is used for evaluating the perception, the experience, and aspirations of a customer. You could really listen to those signals from your end consumer of the services. Then there is Site N2, a framework for digital marketing. And then we have got Policy D, a patented framework for product lifecycle development. We believe it's the first instance of a design thinking led framework in the industry. And then Emoscape is equally important. When what it does is it does a remote and real-time analysis of all the content, product, and experience is emotionally impacting the consumers that can be brought to table. And all this is delivered through the design thinking methodology at the core and the experience labs that we have set up in India, South Africa, US, and so on. At the heart of it, we're a technology company. You could see the technology stacks that we deal in, and we are, of course, powered by various specialized divisions such as Nihilent Analytics, which looks at data sciences, forecasting analytics, a hypercollective, a specialist division on brand strategy, content management, digital marketing, and Intellect, which is SAP Gold Partner, and powered by various products and IPs. Some of them I touched upon, and I would love to present some other of them in more detail when we can get into a more one-to-one kind of a conversation. In terms of our presence, we are very much an Indian company, India headquartered, focused in India. We have got 5 delivery centers spread across India, and we also bring in a global experience through our spread and customers that we work globally. So 20 years we have been around with some 1,600 clients to 2,500 consultants, 16 offices in 7 countries. That's Nihilent. Coming to our Nihilent Microsoft partnership, we are a Microsoft Gold partner, and our partnership goes back 16 plus years. But last 6 to 7 years have been very, very exciting with Azure and cloud really taking over. We together have been part of many such data-led transformation. Many of them have been first of its kind in India and a few abroad outside India that we have done together with our customers and Microsoft. And that has also really helped us to win some global awards and the wins in various hackathons that we do together. We have been a go-to data and AI partner, Power Platform partner, and moving workloads to Azure when it comes to working with Microsoft. Now, I would now hand you over to Ipshita, and she will share some of the trends that are shaping these innovations and how cloud analytics with a strategic engagement approach can really propel organizations to the next level of growth. Over to you, Ipshita. Looking forward.
Thank you, Yogesh, and thank you everybody for being here. It's a pleasure for me to be speaking at this webinar. So let us pick up from where Yogesh left off and understand what are the trends, especially given the fact that we entered a completely new phase in 2020. What are the trends and challenges that industries are facing right now overall and across domain? So if we try to look at what has become critical for businesses in 2021, we can consider this from the level of 4 pillars of the organization: strategy, customers, technology, and intra-organizational trends. So if we think about strategy, then organizations have really moved forward and have really transformed themselves in the way they are starting to think about strategy. there is a huge focus on social responsibility as well as completely new revenue generation models, given that a lot of offline experiences of customers have shifted online. If we think about customers, which are now the center of any organizational strategy today, there is a lot of rebuilding relationships with customers using digital footprints, because your entire customer relationship journey may be governed completely by the digital footprint. Uh, Innovation in customer experience is also a huge must, because as experiences change from or more from offline to online and new technologies come in, it is important to keep on continuously innovating in terms of customer experience. With respect to technology, digital transformation is now no longer something that can be considered a part of strategy. It is compulsory. Smart manufacturing, especially for manufacturing organizations, has become a must, as there is a huge impact on manpower given the state that the pandemic has put us in. Strengthening omni-channel connectivity and making IoT, embedding IoT into your organizational technology strategy is also something which is becoming more of a norm moving ahead. Inside the organization too, as things become more and more uh, governed by the new normal, we see that there is a huge reorientation and reskilling of workforces. There's also a great deal of emphasis on people insights, capability building, and smart training programs. So now let us take a deeper dive and look within industrial verticals to see what is happening there. So if we look at industry verticals, then we see that things are moving very rapidly. And here we've just held up a snapshot of four verticals, but of course there can be much more. If we look at BFSI, if we look at retail, if we look at manufacturing, if we look at healthcare, then two threads that you'll see common running among all four of them is customer and supplier. Number one, that you need to smoothen out your supply chain. And number two, that your customer needs to be the central focus of your strategy, and then the analytics driving your strategy. So if we look at BFSI, definitely customer retention is a huge growth propeller nowadays, and a huge challenge as well. As customers go more and more online, it becomes very important to prevent data breaches. If we look at retail, then smoothing out supply chain issues, especially today, is a number one concern. And ensuring that you are able to reach your customers through omni-channel engagement, through omni-channel loyalty programs, that is also extremely important. In terms of manufacturing, again, we come to our good old friend, the supply chain, that there needs to be a single view, complete visibility. And the other thing which has really come about now is localized and near source production. Because again, given the pandemic, that has thrown into sharp relief that if your logistics is not optimized for the near term, then things like lockdowns may impact you greatly. If we think about healthcare, then that is one area which is standing at the pivot of huge transformation, with even medical suppliers going more into omni-channel engagement to be able to sustain their businesses. So now that we've looked at some of these trends and challenges and how they relate to use cases, that the journey between the challenge and the use case is actually an interesting one, and something that we at Nihilent have become now very seasoned in participating in, with our offerings, mainly cloud analytics and data science as a service. So let's move into an example of how we are achieving this. We have achieved this and we continue to do it at a leading oil company. So this is the context with which, so this is just to point out that when customers engage for leveraging cloud analytics, for getting together a data and analytics strategy, the statements that they come with can be broad enough that they will require a journey for you to delve down into the strategy, which you can then finally convert into use cases. So in this particular case, it was how can we strengthen our non-fuel retail strategies? How can we become a futuristic brand where we become known more for retail and having fuel as a byproduct rather than the opposite? And how can we align our business processes to our data frameworks? And how can we bring both together to take decisions that are data-driven that we can further use to fuel our strategies and thereby our growth? So next, we will look at how we went from the strategic growth focus to the levers, which ultimately led to the use cases. So we had 4 main growth pillars for this company, which were increasing the food to fuel ratio, increasing the net promoter score given by customers, increasing average monthly fuel sales by 10% at every service station, and moving to leadership in areas that were high growth areas in terms of demographics or in terms of migration, etc. And from there, we could segregate this into brand-oriented and customer-oriented initiatives that the client wanted to take. So these brand-oriented and customer-oriented initiatives, such as launching their own private labels, redefining their partnership contracts, doing targeted promotions, increasing customer retentions, these further branch out into use cases using our own proprietary use case prioritization framework. Now that we have looked at how strategy and your use cases and analytics initiatives are so closely coupled together, I would now like to hand it over to Yogesh, who will go further into a live example with Harshal.
Thanks a lot, Ipshita. Very insightful. Now that we have seen the close linkage of cloud analytics and insights produced to growth strategy, let us take a step further and hear from other end how operationalizing cloud analytics has impacted their strategic discussion or decisions. So I'd like to now welcome Harshal. Hello, Harshal. A very warm welcome on behalf of Microsoft and Nihilent. Pleasure to have you here today.
Hi, Yogesh, and good morning, everyone.
Pleasure to have you here today, and thanks for your precious time.
No
really
problem.
Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah.
So, Harshal, a couple of years back, Tata Capital embarked on a data-led journey, digital transformation journey. This involved building a cloud-based enterprise-wide data lake, providing the foundational block to create multiple batch analytics of data to be consumed by various stakeholders across the 3 divisions within Tata Capital. For the benefit of our esteemed guests who have joined us today, I would really like to understand from you what were the challenges and hence the triggers for the TCL team to get onto the data journey.
Yeah. So, before we get into the topic, Yogesh, I would say there is no end to the data journey. Data has been and will continue to be constantly evolving area, right? We were at a specific point and we evaluated, where we are, where we want to be. Right. And as far as our business is concerned, Tata Capital, right, it is in the NBFC, it's an NBFC, right? If you look at NBFC, and I'm sure that many will relate to this because every industry has been becoming a very highly competitive market nowadays, right?
Sure.
So one need to be really agile to capture the market opportunity or to mitigate the market risk, right? Take an example of a COVID, just suddenly came in, and then we need to really, have our strategy aligned to mitigate the market risk or the, environmental risk that whatever is coming in, right? So now this thing has to be supported by a very strong data and analytics platform. This was one of the biggest driver for us to trigger this journey. Along with that, right, we also wanted our all core systems data along with our supporting systems like your finance, HR, right, and treasury, procurement, right, all these data to be in one single place and ably supported by the alternate data, which is very important nowadays with respect to your unstructured and semi-structured data, which has been unexploited over years. Here I'm talking about your social media data, your voice records, right, your email data, right, which is not really the conventional data warehouses is not able to host or process it properly, right? So we wanted all these things to be in one single place. Maybe I will give you an example here. Suppose I think Ikshita talked about NPS, I just saw, right? So if I need to really work on my customer service, I need to increase my NPS, I need to be really very effective in responding to the emails that the customer is writing to me, right? So we recently built a platform with the AI and ML in the data lake, right, where we are prioritizing the customer's emails, right, based on the your natural language processing and the polarity of the messages and the profitability that we are getting from our core systems, right? Based on that, we prioritize the emails, and then we highly profitable customer we prioritize, and based on the polarity of the message, we prioritize the the response to these emails. That in effect really helps us in NPS. Now, this is just one example. There are several other things, right, that we have been doing to really facilitate this journey. Right. Now, this was all not possible, right, with our previous kind of architecture and the data availability. That's where we wanted all these things to be in one single place. So these are some of the triggers for us to start the data lake journey. Now, some of the challenges that we had, because this data was really spread up across several systems, having a single reporting layer on the top of it, right, was not possible. Plus, exploiting the alternate data was a bit of a challenge, where it was done in pockets in different, individual machines. Right? Now, this was also giving rise to the inconsistency in reporting. Right. So these were some of the challenges and triggers, right, that we had. Then we looked at our data landscape, and we put a broad agenda in place with some basic common things that we want to achieve. Some of these are like we need to have a single source of truth that I talked about, a self-service reporting, which is actually trending in the market. That we self-service reporting really gives and really cut down all those layers of a bureaucracy that there is a BRD created and the IT team really creates a report, and the time that person gets the report, right, you already lost the opportunity or you're already come under the risk. Right? Sure. Self-service reporting was one of the agenda that we had, right, that we wanted to address through this. The other is, as I mentioned, the exploit unstructured and semi-structured data, right, in the form of voice records or images and other things, right. And master data management, especially the customer data, has been a key nowadays, right, where we are having several different businesses and products. So we want to understand a particular customer, say Harshal Chaudhary is having what all exposure with us across our different product lines, right. So identifying a customer uniquely, right, is a very key. For this, for this particular reason, right? And then the real-time data capabilities, and the one thing that is really trending in the market nowadays is or maybe it is there for quite a few months, is a citizen data scientist, right? I mean, we are having data scientists, but we would like to really have them concentrating their efforts on the very advanced analytics, right? Whereas right now, I mean, even Microsoft really provides this kind of tools where it is more like a drag and drop, and anybody in the business can also really do a prescriptive, descriptive analytics, right, on the data by just drag and drop, right? So these are some of the fundamental things that we had in mind when we started with the data journey, Yogesh.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great that you shared, Harshal. Now, going through any such transformation, really bringing a lot of challenges internally from the people change or the entire business change that really this kind of technology implementations or transformation bring in, right? So how
Yes.
did you really manage such kind of a change within your organization? It would be great to hear.
I mean, in this particular case, okay, the organization was going through a massive change in the way the data was delivered to the business. And this really depends on where you are currently in the data and analytics maturity and how far you plan to change. And your change management is really, need to be aligned with that. But there are three broad areas I will say that one need to focus on. One is, and very important, right, for any of these is, I think many of us are aware that any of this change management need to have a very strong senior management drive towards the data-driven organization, right? Whether it is through town halls, mailers, or periodic governance with the senior management or a middle management, right? Periodic governance meetings, right? With that. So a senior management drive is very much important. That is one of the things. Now this has to be supported by a training on the new tools and the new way of working, right? That we extensively had quite a few trainings, recorded classrooms type of training where we got the team up to the speed. Right, just giving training and senior management drive towards it is not going to help, right? We need to really facilitate. As a third point I was going to make is we need to facilitate an easy adoption, right? By providing required support to the team so that it becomes very easy for them. In our scenario, I will tell one of the example in facilitating. There are several things we did in facilitating the easy adaptation, but one of the things I would say that when we are working for really having a user who was having exposed to suppose some 300, 500 attributes, suddenly get exposed to some 4,000, 5,000 attributes, right? He need to make sense to that data. We provided a web-based utility, right? Also along with the association with Microsoft only, right? Where there is a web-based utility just like your Google that you search a specific term and that will tell you where this particular term, say industry, right? Where does it exist in the entire data set, right? And what does that really means by a business definition, and what could be some sample values with that, right? So that really helps person to be not lost in the ocean of attributes, right? He can really pinpoint what he exactly wants, and he can pick it and he can move on with that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, some of the 3 points I would have I would have said that any of the team need to really focus on to bring about change in the organization.
No, absolutely spot on, Harshal, and that's the kind of things that we have also observed while such transformation programs go in, and I'm sure the audience also would benefit through that a lot. Now, this journey that we all took together, right? We teamed up together with yourself, Microsoft, and us. So, how can you share some more details around how Microsoft solutions and a partner like Nihilent could really drive this entire thing? How did they help you during this journey, and kind of benefits that you achieved out of it?
Yeah, absolutely, right. Now, our overall approach has been that Microsoft being a technology partner and Nihilent is an implementation partner. And it has been a great journey. It's not like a vendor and a customer relationship. It is more like one team, right? That's the way we saw. Even for Microsoft, we are having regular meetings where Microsoft is helping us in terms of how to implement a specific thing. And I mean, Nihilent is always on the top of the things and has been really in the forefront of implementing this massive data lake kind of platform. Right. So, I mean, all the entire architecture planning has been done together and as a one single team. Right. And some of the things that we had in mind when it comes to the technology selection is like we need to spend more time in the business rules or applying our own processes than really spending time on the infrastructure. And we needed to be agile to get some new tools into our bucket or to scale our performance or capacity. Right. So these are fundamental things that we had in mind when we really had a technology selection. We use several components in Microsoft, ranging from something called as ADL, as Azure Data Lake Store, right, which is to really store raw data that is coming from different systems, right, to the Azure Synapse, which is your enterprise data warehouse, right, to the other PaaS offerings of cloud like Postgres database or Azure Databricks for performing high memory intensive, right, data engineering workloads, as well as the data scientist workload. We use Databricks, and This was ably supported by some of the infrastructure as a service offerings as well, where we had the Tableaus and the other reporting tools right on the top of it, where we had. But overall, it has been really a tri-party, maybe a virtual team than a client-vendor partnership. It has been a great journey together.
Oh, thanks a lot, Harshal. It indeed has been, and it has been of great value for us also to bring in a lot of experience from various similar or larger implementations that we have done. And the value also, the learnings that we all have achieved while going through this entire journey with yourself, and how we have worked as a one team, really, in terms of Microsoft colleagues, in terms of Nihilent colleagues, and your entire team really coming together has been a great journey. Thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing that. One last question that I have for you, Harshal, is, can you share some top 3 success mantras for our industry colleagues who are here in terms of how we can make such kind of a transformation programs more successful?
Yeah, so when I'm talking about all these things about we are really discussing here, Yogesh, I'm not really talking about Tata Capital, my current organization. I'm talking about the general what I've seen in the industry, right? Now, when we say 3 success mantras, as you said. See, one of the things which I have seen in general in the industry, this data initiative is generally taken as a technology initiative, right? I mean, the technology and business partnership, right? And that club with, as I said earlier, a senior management drive towards a data-driven organization is a very key factor, right, to a successful implementation of any data and analytics strategy, right? The second thing I would say that a data program sometimes become too lengthy, right, to really implement. So one need to really plan for a big picture, but deliver in small tranches, so that business is getting the benefit earlier and in phases, right, rather than really waiting for for entire thing to be ready. So that would be the second thing I would say, right, that one need to really work towards. And third, in the current set of things, I would say it is better to really go for a cloud, where you need to be really agile to the changing market needs, right? I mean, it's a question of not on, I think Ipshita also mentioned that, or I think you mentioned, Yogesh, that it's not a question of only competitive advantage, but sometimes it becomes a question of your survival as well, right? That you need to be really agile in these changing market needs. And cloud helps you to do that. You need to be really quick enough to grab the opportunity or to mitigate the risk, as I earlier said, right? So these 3 things I would say, right, are really key for anybody to really have this, a successful implementation towards it. The rest of the things follow through, right, as a team efforts.
Absolutely, totally aligned with you. And I mean, this having a bigger picture or larger picture and building the architecture to support that on a long run is very important. But as you rightly said, I mean, going those in a phased manner, step by step, and showing those benefits to the business really help bring that value. And they continue to see the value coming out of the platform rather than waiting till the end. So absolutely, yes. And of course, the power that cloud now today brings in, it really helps us. I mean, as you said, we have to be really very agile to the change and the market needs and all. And cloud really brings up that power to us. We can really add in things and really go on with things without even waiting for say large cycles that maybe an on-prem infrastructure would really drive. And maybe if you need to ramp down, it may not even allow you to. So yeah. Great to hear those things. I'm sure that is of real value to our audience who's out here. So thanks a lot, Harshal. I mean, it's wonderful to have you here and hear you out in terms of in reality how Tata Capital really went through that journey, which would really help all of us. So please continue to be with us. And now what I'll do is thanks a lot. And what I'll do is now move further to the next person. I'll now invite Nikhil. Let me just share the screen again very quickly. Yeah. So I would now invite Nikhil to share technology considerations for large implementations such as Tata Capital and similar ones that he has been involved with, specifically from the perspective of interoperability, unified data layer, insight as a service, and enterprise governance. So over to you, Nikhil. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Yogesh, and thank you, Arshad, for those wonderful insights. And the way you explain taking those small steps and building up on that and taking that thought process further. Let me, quickly touch upon the four important building blocks which are needed, for an AI-based led architecture. So one of the things we have seen most of the enterprises ask is, how does an enterprise architecture would fit with what, kind of looking at the data modernization and how those key components needed for an, AI-based led architecture. So moving to the next slide, uh, imagine that the first and the important aspect of it is having a very strong data platform where you can have a good data ecosystem in place, along with cloud offerings where you can have clean data pipelines where you can ingest, standardize, and make your data available for your downstream use cases. The other important layer here is, a need for experimentation. And as Arshad was talking about, imagine that, if you're a retailer client and you want to optimize your supply chain, just having an out-of-box algorithm might not help, and there has to be a way where you can tweak your algorithms and make it appropriate for the business context that algorithms are developed. So a very much needed aspect of a platform where experimentation is very much possible. And the other tangential dimension to it is a way of quickly developing algorithms based on the business context, so that insights can be derived very quickly. And talking about all those three, there has to be one important aspect of how you can have a scalable infrastructure so that you can deploy it on scale, be it on-prem, cloud, or hybrid architecture. And that brings to a very important aspect, that how these technical perspective marry those foundational building blocks. And that brings me to the the next slide, where what kind of things we have been hearing from the customer uh, with our experience, and what are those four broader areas which marry to those initial four technical building blocks. And that's where we have seen customers who need for an intelligent integration layer which shape your data across multiple touch points of diverse data sources. And that's where the entire concept of interoperability pitches in, and building the DevOps mindset into data driven things, it what calls it out for. The another important aspect is building that unified data layer with standardized vocabularies in place, so that you don't have to perform same activities in an ad hoc way every single time. And how quickly the same data can be made available to your downstream stakeholders, where you can standardize your data in a shape which is easily consumable. Similarly, the third point is a comprehensive and ready to deploy solution that allows organizations to get actionable insights and business outcomes at speed with a flexible commercial model. So how quickly, based on say a given set of data, insights can be generated through some package reports and dashboards and pre-built KPIs for different business functions and industries. And the fourth important aspect we keep on hearing from customers is, how do you start an enterprise governance journey? What is the first step a CXO or CTO has to take, and where does one start? Because enterprise governance itself is a bigger journey. And having said that, let us quickly move into each of these aspects and understand that how we have leveraged this in terms of for each of these building blocks. So moving to the next slide, and talking about the interoperability, uh, what we have done for customers is using a plethora of this Azure services which Azure provides in terms of integration offerings, be it Azure Data Factory or Synapse Pipeline. We have intelligently created a wrapper on top of that, which is kind of a plug and play connector that would allow your systems to connect with multiple systems, without having to worry about the implementation. Now, what it does, it's enable data to be routed to many sources, so that you have an improved access to your data, which removes silos. You can have compliance standards and cross hybrid integration capabilities. For one of our leading NBFC client, what we did is we created this integration layer using Data Factory. So Data Factory is always looked as an orchestration layer, but what we did was we used Data Factory and couple of other components like Azure IT Hub and Event Hub, and created a an interoperability layer, which acts as an integration layer, and all your batch processing cycles are reduced by 30-40% because for the same set of data sets, things move pretty quickly. Moving to the next part, and that is where the idea of unified data layer comes in. Now imagine that every strong analytics is driven by a way of having a common data model for each of the data which you are ingesting. And as Arshad was mentioning, you have multiple data sources coming in. You build a common data model which basically have a unified schema based uh, s- uh, business layer which acts as a single source of truth, and it also helps you create those golden records for your customer profiles. For example, being for one of the customer in the retail sector, customer 360 is an important aspect, and the customer 360 itself needs a layer where you define your common data models, and that's where all the Azure analytic services like Synapse Analytics, which we are seeing a lot of traction in, Azure Cosmos DB along with Databricks, this all fits in very well. And it's important that you have the right data at the right time and the right modality to actually go ahead and use your unified data layer in a way that it makes sense to drive your additional use cases. And this brings me to the third important aspect, which is your insight as a service. Now what we had is we had our recent platform, which was an open source stack, and this recent platform is basically a forecasting as service from our end. Now we saw the power of Azure services. We used all the services and then gradually moved our open stack to Azure because of the scaling and ease of use of features like AutoML and link services within Synapse, which really helps to build solutions around it. And what we have right now is auto indenting solution in Synapse, where given a set of input parameters, you can forecast sales, item ingredients, and things like that. So that it really helps to bring in quick wins in terms of generating those insights rather than waiting for a long time. And that brings me to the last aspect, which is your enterprise governance. Now, as I was explaining you, right, the data governance itself is a big journey, and people always have, where do you start? And that's where our own governance framework is what we bring into picture, where we start with three stages of assess, consult, and implement. And how did we leverage it is we implemented Azure Purview again for one of our client, where we created that unified data governance service and taking those small steps in terms of identifying the data quality issues, gradually moving into compliance, security, and privacy, and then bringing in the other areas of information lifecycle management. So overall, to conclude, and to bind all the areas, you have four different technical pillars, which where there is a need to align it to the customer needs, and that's where it's important to not only look at the services but use it creatively and intelligently to bring in all the four important pillars. And now let me quickly take you through a couple of case studies we have, and one of them is itself the Tata story, which Harshad was also talking about. And what we saw that as Asha was speaking, that basically we saw that there is a way of creating a unified layer of viewing the reports across multiple departments, and a way of a single source of truth for uh, uh, creating that unified layer, so that there is one view to you look into your master data as well as reference data across verticals, and how that entire data analysis process can be automated. Let me quickly take you to the next slide, which will talk about the architecture. Now, this is what we started understanding. So we understood that Tata being a group of companies, and each of the companies would have individual set of challenges in terms of their individual data needs. So we used Azure Data Factory not for the orchestration, but we bought that feature in, and we created a layer of a lot of integration touch points and building that intelligence across it. So for example, when we understand one set of data for one set of customers, and looking into the end goal of use cases like new customer acquisition or customer retention or upselling or cross selling across all domains, we understand that for a set of data which is going to get ingested, it's important to use Data Factory in a way that once those pipelines are in place, they can be automated in a way that for the same set of data, same pipelines can be reused. And that's where those intelligent wrappers comes into picture. Similarly, on the data lake side, when we created the single source of truth, it was important for not only go with the traditional data lake approach where you create your three-layer data architecture, but also implement some form of governance in terms of having those data quality checks in place, and also creating customer based profiles based on the data we are reading from each of them. So imagine that if we understand a customer, and when we are ingesting data from multiple sources, there is a way of defining a longitudinal record for each of that patient. And that's where for each of the customer, that's where it helps to derive those necessary insights, be it using Azure Databricks as your as your processing engine, or storing the profile on the semantic layer on the SQL data warehouse. And that's led to very specific business benefits, which talks about deriving a single view of customers for key insights, or on-time availability of accurate data baked by business rules and analytic insights. Now let me quickly take you to another case study as well. uh, Yogesh, can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so the business benefits are, we just talked about it, and Yogesh, please move to the next slide so that we can talk about, yeah. And this is another important milestone in our entire Nihilent journey, where we helped a customer where they were having specific challenges in terms of creating that single platform where they can have emotional connect with the customer. So for Serious IQ, we created kind of a platform that enables aircraft owners and users to communicate with their aeroplane remotely through a mobile app. And you can imagine that you can wake up the aeroplane, query it, receive real-time health status that will be telling you your fuel levels, your TKS level, oxygen level, your battery level. And this helps owners to know their airplanes are ready before reaching the airport. Quickly moving to the next slide and giving you an overview of how those insights are generated. And the vertical record set, what you see is where creating those specific profiles for each of the aircrafts comes into picture, and from where we are able to derive use cases, which are, say, how a potential failure is coming, and how the aircraft has been inspected accordingly, or how can we show customer how they can fly in according with standard processes, like they should not climb too steep. So all the four areas which we talked about initially comes in a part and parcel in each of these use cases and studies, wherein in the Tata Capital case, we saw that we created a unified data layer along with an intelligent integration layer. And here you can see that bringing this insights as a service along with a governance framework, where each of the telemetry data which is being gathered is converted into a way where insights can be quickly generated based on specific Azure offerings like Cosmos DB, which allows you to have good concurrencies. So that brings me to the end of how we have gathered all these building blocks and created this business case studies. So let me hand it over back to Yogesh now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nikhil. Very, very insightful, and ties up very nicely in terms of the technology considerations that you covered for us under the four different pillars of interoperability, unified data layer, insights as a service, and enterprise governance. It ties very well in terms of what Harshal earlier shared in terms of this real-time implementations, what kind of challenges such kind of approach and such kind of technology considerations to be done upfront, and choosing the right technology, right platform, how it really helps. And also ties well back to what Ipshita mentioned earlier in terms of how the cloud analytics and insights are produced. They all come together as part of the growth strategy for the organization. So thanks a lot. I mean, it really sums up very, very well. I would request attendees, to really write any questions you might have on the chat box, which we can take it up out here. And if I have all the speakers, maybe I've got one question really that has come up, which talks about how do you make the link between strategic objectives, actual use cases, and value driven. So, Ipshita, do you want to take that one?
Sure, Yogesh. So, as I mentioned before, that these three are very closely coupled together. Strategic objectives, the use cases that you finally work on, and the value that you drive from the use case. And in fact, I think Harshal also gave a very nice example and mentioned this, that without having this coupling, a digital transformation, a data-led transformation will rarely be successful. And this is also the gap that you find in a number of organizations, not just in India, but also in a number of places in the world. And in fact, that is precisely what we have worked on since a number of years, and particularly in a project last year. So how you do this is that a cloud-led data strategy is not to be treated as a complete technology program under the ownership of either the IT or the BI units in the organization. Business has to come together. So it is only when you engage with business, you look at the strategic objectives, and then based on the strategic objectives and the data that is available to the business, then you go ahead and make your use case strategy. So the way that we did this was that we went into, once we had the objectives, we went into a blue ocean mode in which, let us assume that we have all the data that we need. If we assume that, then what use cases would we have worked on that would have aligned with those objectives? And once you have that, then you can match it against the data that you have, and that helps you prioritize. Because again, and I would like to bring up another point that Harshal mentioned, which was very salient, that deliver in chunks, because you don't want the business to be waiting for the entire operation to get completed, because then the perception arrives that we are not getting any value out of this strategy and this operation. So to enable that delivery in chunks, it's important to be able to prioritize your use cases, to deliver them in sprints. And then as far as value driven goes, you have to make sure that the moment you are working on this prioritization, you also have a plan ready per use case as to how you are going to measure the impact of that use case. And sometimes the impact may not be immediately top line or bottom line, although eventually you have to get there. Initially, you may have to measure the impact first through adoption, through usage, and then try to keep a kind of record of what decisions are being impacted by the analytics that you are providing. So that sets up the stage for your initial value driving, which can keep the stakeholders engaged in this, invested in this, and then you move on to the actual numbers, which are definitely the end game of any data-led strategy.
Sure, Ipshita. And that really takes me to the another query, which is all around. How do we really go about this data science journey with all this data that we have now brought together? The big data lakes have been created. They're all that structured, unstructured data. We have been able to now at least have a single version of truth. And now I want to really go about on my data science journey. How do I really go by it? Right? Because it's more experimental in nature. So is that something you can help us as a service, Ipshita?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that has been the topic of debate and research, as well as, lots of different approaches in the industry for quite some time. But I believe we have hit upon an approach which actually manages to take care of all perspectives. So getting started on the data science journey, again, I at the risk of sounding repetitive, it starts with the business. It starts with the business, it aligns with the data. So prioritize, design your framework, and we have had lots of wonderful insights about how to set up your framework from Nikhil. Implement, and within the implementation, keep a stage which is separate. So for example, if you're doing agile-based implementation, separate out your R&D phase, which is going to be running several experiments or maybe doing a portion of the EDA. So in your implementation for each phase of the data science journey, separate out an R&D portion, which you are going to treat as a separate backlog altogether. And the deliverable of that is that you have a decision. After that decision, move on to the operationalization phase. Keep doing this in sprints. And as you get done with each sprint, do not forget that even if you're working on sprint 2 of your use cases, you still need to be measuring the impact of sprint 1. So that means you continuously keep engaging with the business after production. After production, you engage with them to ensure they adopt, to ensure their queries on your solutions are answered, to ensure that they are actually seeing value out of the use case, because often they will have very, very salient and useful feedback for you, which will help you enrich your solutions further. So it is a very cyclical, adaptive, and agile process. And it is a journey which has to be tightly tied with business engagement throughout.
Wonderful. Thanks for explaining it nicely, Ipshita. And I would like just to add one more dimension to it, and it also ties back to what Nikhil shared in terms of one of the experiences with Cirrus. And it's, of course, the importance of business working alongside with IT is given. But then there is another important factor, and that factor is the human factor. The end consumer or the user of that particular system who's going to consume that service is very, very important, because ultimately it's all about humans' ambitions and aspirations, and it's about the experience that we are going to give to them. And that's where the Cirrus story actually makes it, it's very, very different. While on the one side, of course, it's a technology implementation, and Nikhil really shared some real insights into it. And it's kind of a connected manufacturing, connected aircraft, but it is all driven by experience. It's about the human at the center in terms of how they would like to experience when they are using this particular service, how the entire experience of owning an aircraft, how an entire experience of being able to interact with their aircraft even before you reach the airport, and how then you are able to actually use all the data being generated to actually share your experiences with your community as a whole. So that also makes it very, very important dimension in terms of humans being at the center of it. I just have one last, maybe enough time for one last question. Maybe I'll request Nikhil to take it. The question is, why do we need external resources to set up the data platform, or why can't we do it DIY? Nikhil?
Okay, thank you, Yogesh, for that question. So, yeah, we have seen a lot of companies, have gone this path of doing things by themselves, and being AI, ML, and big data being that new shiny object. Everyone wanted to build their own data ingestion, management frameworks. But what we have seen after a couple of years, customers realize that they cannot keep up with the changes, because a lot of stats are changing. The deployment models keeps on changing, and there is a lot of demand for specific use cases. And also the time to insights is very critical, as we were explaining in the previous slide. So a customer takes weeks and not months to onboard a new data sources and then make them available for downstream use cases. So sometimes for a CTO or a LOB owner, it gets quite difficult, because they cannot get data quickly for insight generations, and then that is where specialized in bringing this kind of Azure services. For example, if you're taking an example where we can provide an off-the-shelf Azure services implementations and integrations, so that customers can quickly get their data from ingestion to consumption, with the right governance, self-service access, and without having to build their own way of doing things. And one of the key outcomes we drive today, so that you can go from weeks to months or to days or hours to get a new data source in the new platform and then derive insights on top of it.
No, thanks a lot, Nikhil. And just running out of time, if there are any few more questions which may have come up, we'll certainly connect back to you and maybe do it more one-to-one with yourself. I'd like to really thanks DNB. Thank you very much, Microsoft, really for coming together for this particular webinar. Thanks to the speakers, and special thanks, Harshal, for joining us today. It was really, really insightful to hear it out from individuals who are actually making that transformations on the ground at the customer end. So thanks a lot for joining us.
My pleasure, Yogesh. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And thank you to all the audience who joined us today. And we look forward to more conversations with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Yogesh, for so beautifully weaving together this session. Today's session would not have been possible without the active participation of all our esteemed speakers, panelists, and delegates. I would like to thank each one of you for taking time out and being a part of this virtual conference today. A special thanks to Nihilent for their support to this initiative, without whom this conference wouldn't have been possible. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Take care, stay safe, have a wonderful day ahead.